Good evening. You're listening live to the Extreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Alongside me tonight at Professor Pixel, young 20-something. We're talking about, of course, tonight our early show on Sundays, Xtreme TV. We are covering currently The Prisoner, one of the best TV shows of all time, a spy show starring Patrick McGowan. We are on season 1, episode 6, titled Many Happy Returns. And I have to say, Pixel, initially, when I first watched The Prisoner, a lot of these episodes were out of order. It was late at night. I'd tape them on the VCR and I'd watch them. And this was actually the first episode that I watched. And I had no idea what the hell was going on, from waking up in the village, nothing's there, and then he escapes and he ends up back in there. I was like bamboozled, like, what the hell's just going on? That's what drew me in, was this episode in particular. So fast forward to 30 plus years to where we're at now. I got to sit there and say, as we're going in order in all the episodes week to week, this is probably one of my favorites. I'm not going to say it's the best of all of them, but I'm going to say I really just enjoyed it for some reason, particularly the first act, and I have zero problems with the third act like sometimes I do. What's your initial take on this episode?
I have to agree. This episode has a real strength to it that I didn't expect, especially considering that for like the full first half, there's not a single word of English dialogue spoken. And somehow it's just that enthralling. I mean, as soon as he wakes up, you know something's wrong. The entire village seems to be shut down, and he takes that opportunity, and it's insane how far it goes.
We're almost halfway through, and so we've talked about certain themes with The Prisoner. We talked about don't trust a woman. We've talked about mind control. We've talked about the village representing government. You can argue about what form specifically, and whether it was just a nice way to kind of make it feel existential, because personal liberty and freedom is really, to me, the strongest concept here at play. You could argue the spy stuff is secondary to it, although it's more of an intelligent James Bond without sleeping with women or using guns. But for me, this show is the patterns that we've seen. Okay, he finds a way to escape almost with the help of some ally, and when it's a woman or even a guy, it doesn't work out. And here he escapes again, so it's like every other episode he's getting out, but he's being drawn back in. And to me, we've talked about how some of the episodes seem like they're going out of order just a little bit, just based off of certain things. And this one, I feel like you could probably dropped it in about halfway through, which they did, and it just seems to make sense because they've tried mind control, hardcore drugs a couple episodes. He did escape one other time and got drawn right back in. Although the episode that he managed to escape but then got brought back was the idea was that he was supposedly somewhere like maybe on the eastern Russian coastline up there, rather than where the supposed location of the village is here. And I think it's kind of interesting because I thought, oh my God, is this the secret of the village and what's going on? But let's just dive right in. Go ahead and take us through the first few scenes here of what you noticed and what came up.
Yeah, well, like I said, number 6 wakes up and he finds the village is deserted. The power's not working. The water's not working. He has basically nothing. He goes around town, he looks, he rings the bell, nobody is anywhere. The only thing that he's actually able to hear at one moment that sounds like, oh my gosh, it's somebody else, it's a cat. So he takes the opportunity. He goes ahead, he takes some supplies from the store, writes down IOU number 6, and he makes himself a little raft. And after a few days of sailing, there's this one point where he's resting, and then comes this little boat. And inside of this boat, there are a couple of, I don't know, were they Germans? I think they were Germans.
Yeah.
And they steal his supplies and then toss his body in the water, and they're getting ready to go. But that's when number 6, he's been up for a little while he was being ransacked. He swam and held on to this little life. Well, it's not really a lifesaver. It was more that's just getting too into detail. But he is able to climb aboard and hide away and devise this little plot as he's studying the area to get the two that are sailing this boat and trap them in a room so that way he can try to take it over. But that doesn't last long. So he ends up in the water again not too long after the two escape and they attack him. And he eventually wakes up and on land again, and that's when he runs into a couple of gypsies that help him. And I'll go ahead and pause right there.
Yeah, because actually, this is about the first 15, 20 minutes of the whole episode. Like you said, nothing's being spoken. I have to sit there and say there's only been a few times in movies or TV shows up to this point in the late 60s when this first aired that you had this doomsday, post apocalyptic, pre zombie apocalypse type of environment. And they nailed it. I mean, they absolutely friggin' nailed it. Just no talking, no whatever. But I think the creepiness factor gets elevated because we've talked about how much control the government has on everything. We know as viewers watching that they're giving him some sort of gentle mind control stimulation or whatever you want to call it, adjustments with his lights, and he's unaware of it. We've talked about how most of his escapes are everything, despite maybe having some aid. The aid's really, yanking the rug underneath you. It's giving you enough rope to hang yourself with. It's not legitimate. It seems to be. We could argue about last episode. We'll see about that later if that comes up again. But I think here what's really scary is that we know that there's a curfew. We know that they have a social credit system. Okay. We've talked about how communistic, for lack of a better term, or socialistic, generally speaking, that those concepts are. And here we see it in practice in the village. We don't know who made the village. We don't know if it's his side, the other side, part of the NWO side where everybody puts it together and it's a big agreement. So when you see something that's of this giant structure being built like the room he wakes up in is exactly like his at home, but then he wakes up in a village, that's disconcerting. The fact that he just has a number is disconcerting. So when he wakes up and the water's not working and the phone's not working and the electric locks, that you have to have on your door that they control are not working, that's creepy because you go, how is a big entity like that having lost control? And we'll have the answer, of course, at the end of the episode. I imagine everybody can figure out what it is. But it makes you go, is there something else besides what was going on here up through all these episodes in the setup different? Was there a giant blackout? Was there a wartime thing going on that he's unaware? He's in an isolated place, it appears to be. We wouldn't know that. So I think the little touches of him like not getting the water running, or his coffee pot that he starts to plug in, that's when he first notices things aren't working. I think all that stuff's kind of good, but as he's walking around the village, it looks like whatever activities would have occurred overnight once curfew's up, like the places where you would go get tea and sit down and all that, they're not cleaned up. It's like the park people didn't come in after hours and cleaned up, and when you walk in on Main Street, there's still trash everywhere. So it's really cool. And I don't know, for some reason, to me, one of the best shots I think I've seen so far this entire village, besides him walking around, is when he climbs up to the top of the bell tower, looks around, rings it, and sees absolutely no signs of life, no lights, in the distance, nothing. And of course, he is being watched, which I think is kind of funny with the black cat, because that's supposed to symbolize bad luck. And we've talked about big government always watching. I thought, like I say, they just nailed it with everything. So, of course, being a super spy, went through the military, we don't really know what his background is. So we learn it or guess from it by what he's able to do. He looks like he can box a little bit, somewhat athletic. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's got his arms are really close, and when he punches, don't know if that's intentional or not, but it looks like he's thrown a punch or two, even if it's light boxing. And he has the ability to construct a little raft like you talked about. And the IOU thing, when he goes into the village store and goes to steal his whatever supplies, about a month's worth, let's say, I thought it was weird that he would leave an IOU. Maybe that's ethics. I don't know, but it just, not saying it's right or it's wrong. It just stood out to me. It's like, why would you write an IOU? Is that him just being an ass? And let's not forget, he did go into number two's domicile that he's been in times before, and it was completely empty. And it's neat because you see him driving around checking out the boars perimeter. We do not see Rover at all, our giant evil energetic weather balloon type thingy. But it was cool. It just showed him with a sense of urgency, taking photos of everything, doing everything he needs to do to get out ASAP while he has an opportunity. He jumps on it, but he does it professionally too. He's not desperate. But there's something about that cat watching him that's kind of cool. And he, after a while of being on the sea, thankfully no storms, he does run into this boat, which again, we don't know if they're there to help him or not, because he's kind of losing a little bit. He stopped shaving and he's been out there for several weeks, but they steal his stuff and they dump us over. So that's just kind of friggin' dark. And I think it's ironic because here he is about a month later, he's getting close to society. He's breaking down mentally. And here's people from the outside world that he, might feel safe in. And what do? They rob his ass and dump him over and steal his stuff. And we, of course, find out when he swims to the back of the boat and gets on this small boat. It's unnecessarily and elaborately long for filler, and it works because it gives us some karate chops and some action sequences and stuff, and it shows him using his brain. Because remember, he goes in like the little kitchen area and he sets some stuff on fire there in the pan to kind of have smoke to draw them separated. Because here's a guy that's been eating a reduced caloric intake for a month or whatever. He's not going to be physically as active, but I thought he kind of was a little stupid the way he tied him up, because the guys did get free, and that's what made it unnecessarily long to me. But the point being, he didn't use guns, even though they were there on there. So we know they're bad dudes. They don't even talk, maybe some words in German. I don't know what they were. And he manages to, or in all intents and purposes, it seems to be that he escapes. But it's the first time we see him kind of haggard, I guess, if you want to call it that, which we have not seen before, even though he's supposed to be being saved. I'll tell you an interesting part to this is that when the guys get the guns on the boat and he jumps overboard and then the guys take off and it's at night and he wakes up on the rocks in a beach. I mean, that's straight up cliche out of movies and novels, kind of like being reborn and here you are. Are you in heaven? Are you in hell? You're in a new land, whatever you want to call it. I mean, that's kind of symbolic. But the shot, my first thought was, is this the White Cliffs of Dover where they filmed it? I don't think it was, of course, because it was filmed in Wales. But it's just a really beautiful shot. And then my first thought was, why the hell is he trying to climb up the side of where all the stuff at to the high ground to see everything when, there's this absolutely gorgeous lighthouse close by? And my first thought was, oh, he would run there. But thankfully, and this was smart, because when you do stuff like it and you're really hardcore watching it, you want answers. And he looks at the lighthouse, and it's one where the base of it's just slightly submerged. And I think it was genius here to have him run into people, the guy walking his dog. And you're right, they're gypsies, the roamers. He gets Gypsy Coffee from an absolutely stunning, gorgeous young woman. And then he gets all peppy off of that and takes off. And he ends up pretty much back in his own town of London as he gets to a main road and there's a police stop, and he jumps on board, does the spike thing and climbs in. And it's pretty freaking awesome. He works his way back in. So somehow he, even though he's on a small raft, managed to catch a current that went towards where he needed to be. And, the genius of TV, all these wonderful things can happen and click in a place to get him back to where he's standing outside his own house, which I'll pause here in a moment. We'll catch up. But I love this bit. And things with the gypsies are, they're roamers, they're wanderers. In a way, it's also reflecting what he's doing. But I looked up the lady because she was quite stunning. We've talked about how there's been some natural beauties on the show, but no romantic stuff going on. She apparently is like this visual artist, and she's like a countess or whatever. And she was in a few things before doing stuff. She's a stunner. So this happened to be one of her first things she did. I just thought it was kind of interesting. But I was like, are they going to do anything with these people? Can you trust them? The paranoia level is up, which I liked, especially because they can't really speak his language.
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. But yeah, it's weird to go, okay, 30 minutes, more than a little halfway into the episode, he is right outside the flat that we see when you're watching the opening bit there too. So any thoughts on any of the things I just mentioned, and if not, and take it from here and move forward?
Yeah. So from where we get to go from the small tribe of gypsies, he is able to work his way to a street. It's one of my favorite moments. He pulls back and he sees a police officer and cars just going right by it. And I know we have the little cart things in the village, and those are cute, but to see actual motor vehicles just going, it was a shocking sight to see. And so when he finally ends up at his house, he goes ahead and he's just knocking. And there's a maid in there that's gone ahead and cleaning up, and she's saying that she can't just let him in. And that's when a woman comes up in his car, the car that we've seen in every single opening of the show thus far. It's his car, and there's a woman in there. And he insists that he needs to go ahead and take a look inside if he can. And, I'm the previous owner of this house. And so she does, and she lets him know that she's Mrs. Butterworth. And she's got a way with her that's definitely making you wonder where her allegiances lie.
Did you get a cougar vibe from her?
Oh yeah, definitely. She was working those moves on him. Oh,
she was comfortable in her sexuality.
Arthur died, or whatever her husband's name was. Yeah, and he gets to look around, and it feels so familiar, and yet not familiar at all, because we don't really ever get to see him in this house. And so quickly, it seems that he has escaped. Mrs. Butterworth seems to be legit. She feeds him, lets him go ahead to take a shower, get changed into some of her husband's old clothes, and whenever he's getting ready to go ahead and go, he's going to borrow the car. She says she's going to bake him a birthday cake because tomorrow's his birthday, March 19th, I believe. So he decides to go ahead and go into the underground car park where it leads to his office, the office that we see at the beginning of every episode. And there is some of his former colleagues just waiting. And they aren't entirely convinced of his story. But number 6 did the smart thing, and he took a camera from that shop earlier, and he was taking pictures. He's showing the village in full, and he's saying, okay, here are specific details. They took away my name. They took away blah, blah, blah. We do get a name in here, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be completely fake. Peter Smith.
Wasn't that a monkey? Just kidding.
Yeah. But here he is just trying to work out where to go from here. He wants to find this place. He wants to figure out who's working there. And of course, they're a little suspicious of him, but he is a man with a mission. And so finally, they're able to work out where this village might be. And they settle on the coast of Morocco, southwest of Portugal and Spain, and that it might be on an island. So he goes ahead and he has a pilot go ahead and get ready. And he's going to fly over, see if he can find it. And so he goes ahead out first. At the same time, there is this small van called Pinto van, and it's basically a delivery van for pinto beans. I didn't realize that you needed a van for pinto beans, but there you go. And that's when a pilot comes out, gets in, and just gets ready to set it on up. They fly over, and finally we get to see the village in full view. And it seems that his mission is about to be a success, but I'll go ahead and pause right there and let you finish us up.
So a couple things. Mrs. Butterworth, who has his flat right now furnished, obviously, it seems like with him being haggard and being on a run for a month, we do have the stranger in the strange land, Robert Heinlein kind of vibe thing going on. And I think it's really cool because we know how hard he's worked. And, so all these rhetorical questions. Well, has he gotten too comfortable in the village when you can never go back home again, sort of thing? But he is. And when he actually gets in, starts telling her things about the place, so she doesn't think he's crazy. He doesn't do it in that maniacal sort of way where she believes him. And so I thought this was pretty tight. I think that with her, of course, we can't trust her, period. We know that from an earlier episode that we don't know which one specifically, but I think it was the one he argues with in the intros. They're in on it. So these are a different group of people that I guess that he's worked with, or lateral level bosses that he can go to something, maybe people that were his bosses while he was in the military, let's say, versus working for the government type of thing. And so it's a very small, very powerful elite man operation for it. And it's cool because, again, you go from the village, from what we're used to seeing, to scenes of almost the opening and the streets that are on and all that too. With Mrs. Butterworth, though, it's so obvious that she's not going to be who she is. But I thought the government thing of her explaining, well, I worked with such and such to get the lease on this place because he wants to see it so he can get some information. And she's like, yeah, I even got the car thrown in, because she's driving his car, which is a big FU. And we know that the government can just make things up like that and give you new names, identities, and you get lost in the system. And we never again, I think, saw a lot of that in modern media at that point. But Jim throwing it in there like that, it's so believable, that you could do it. And new name, new face, new location. So we can't trust her, even though she's doing it. But I tried zooming in on my super HD moment here when I pause the screen, because she feeds them, she's getting them some money, she's basically taking a pity party on them and all that too, being very alluring. But I swear to God, when the maid makes them a snack, it's cucumber sandwiches. And I have to say that because only in Moonraker do we get cucumber sandwiches references, which is phenomenal. So that's an absolutely like +10 for this episode too, that he's being served cucumber sandwiches in a moment of English royalty, because it's best when they have tea and they do their own little thing like that, and you have cucumber sandwiches. We do not get enough tea and cucumber sandwiches, and really just media in general. So that by this point, I was just ready to turn the episode off. I was so ecstatic. But joking aside, when he meets these two guys, one of them's kind of like buying into him, saying, all right, I get it. And here's some photos, it could be plausible. And the other guy's playing bad cop, where he's like, we have a problem. You've been gone for a while. You come back. How do we know you're not a double agent? It's a legitimate claim. That was the real paranoia that is referred to as the Cold War. Spy who came in from the cold and all the 60s stuff that was out there. It's in full bloom, because after at least the defeat and retreat of communism on one particular front, that doesn't mean that communism in itself died in the 40s and going into the 50s. It just percolated in other areas, and Britain definitely took a lot of liking to putting it in their media and stuff too. So this is a very high level type of thing that as a youngster watching it really didn't feel that powerful. But now as an adult rewatching, I'm like, oh my God, the cynicism involved in here too. And it was nice to see him go from, oh my God, we got out of here, to him being basically broken down physically and being mentally screwed, to now being cleaned and all dressed up, fully energized with meals and dressing coming in, and being pissy with these people and all that too, so much so that he convinces them to check it out. It's great stuff. It's really great episode. We needed a bit of him being a bit of an ass and just whatever, rather than womp womp womp. He got out and got pulled back in again, kind of shenanigans nonsense. And this nails it. And again, 30 minutes, more than half the episode, I'm not really saying much or anything at all, adds to what little they do talk about in here. And they're like, well, we're going to trust you, but we got to verify stuff. So we are going to go through everything. So they do this really quickly, and you get a quick scene of some agents interviewing Mrs. Butterworth, and where he set up, or where there was like the Gypsy, where they had their camp in the fire too. So you go, yeah, they're going through their the motions for it. And I geeked out too when they drew up the big map, and they used all their secret, or it's not really secret, but all their naval calculations too, about drawing circles and lines and current paths and estimations and all this kind of stuff. Of course, we would do it by satellites today, but for them to do that by hand, that was really badass. And we find out that supposedly it's in this huge region narrowed down off like maybe the Moroccan coasts, Canary Islands, sort of. That's just cool to me. I just thought this was the shit watching it again, but it's totally like 180 degrees from where we thought it might have been, like around Poland or something, or to the east of Denmark and all that too. So you get some stock footage sites of them flying over and looking at it, and we do see, and this, I have to bring this up because you and I do roughly monthly, and we're overdue for our next James Bond review, and we haven't gotten up to the Living Daylights or the Bond series in the 80s and 90s when he switched over. But one of Roger Moore's last ones, there's a scene with a milkman, and he's listening to some headphones, and he's carrying milk before he blows, and he has milk bombs going off. And this is what I think. I go, God, did they steal that from here? Because here we see the guy, it looks like he's delivering milk or whatever, and we know that he's actually taking over, but it's not so obvious when you watch the show of the pilot's actual thing. So the two-man crew with number 6 is the passenger in there, gets ejected out of the plane while his two bosses are watching. His two bosses are watching them take off. They really don't know what's going on too, but it's a bit more pissier than before because we get to see him eject and the be seeing you part. Yeah, and he lands, and we still see the same black cat by the broken T-mug or whatever it is right there and next to the old folks home when he lands in the low tide area there by the boat in the old folks home, which is where he usually sits there, and he's walking around. It's still empty, but when he gets in his room, all of a sudden the lights come on, the water starts running, and of course the teapot, the kettle he left on, starts to percolate a little bit. And what was really funny to me was the cat happened to follow him in there too. And what do you know, damn it, Mrs. Butterworth herself shows up with a birthday cake, and she's got the number 2 sign on her. So now we have another number 2, because God forbid we have continuity with number 2s, and the only continuity we do have is a new number 2. Goes to the window, opens up, and all of a sudden now we start seeing people walking around, and then boom, end episode. It's really F you in your face. Nothing big to say. I like it a lot. This is the Prisoner bare bones stripped down to its fundamental level, not just the themes, but just on how it feels too. This is definitely a level on steroids that we've hadn't had in several episodes, and I just enjoyed the hell out of it. I think it was a great way to end. I love it. It's going to make me think that they're going to try to get a bit more existential with some of these episodes, because again, as we've talked about, the less is more approach. Try to escape this way, that doesn't work. That way doesn't work. You run out of different ways to do it, and most of the time you're lucky. So at some point, that concept, I would think, has to run out of steam. Here, he actually gets back, and it's a second time he actually gets back involved with people that he supposedly works with or for, the government. And he's been screwed at least one time that we know of, because he can't trust the people that he originally left with. And now we don't know if he can trust the people that he met or if they'll be involved in more. But we definitely know that the pilot that replaced the original pilot with him was somebody had the information as this is going on. And it happened on his birthday in a span of less than 24 hours, him going there and coming back. So, man, good stuff, paranoid stuff. This is what TV should be, where it just gives you some awesome kind of feelings about paranoia, liberty, being a free person, trying to be smart and do stuff to your fullest capability, being a stranger in a strange land. It's brilliant. I just have nothing more but good things to say about it. And I'm going to hush and let you finish up with your final thoughts on this section here, or anything else.
Honestly, I should have known something was different with this episode when I first started watching the intro, because number 2 in every episode is introduced via just splicing in the actor to fill in the role. And so we hear, I don't know which one it is, but a guy speak, and he goes ahead and I am the new number 2, but they don't actually show who it is, which was very odd. So as soon as we jumped from that and the village was abandoned, I was wondering if, well, wait, is there going to be a number 2 at all? The answer was yes. As soon as Mrs. Butterworth walked in with that number 2 pin on her, I was ready to clap. They hoodwinked us hard, and I loved feeling that, because watching it every week, it can feel at times a little stale with how you're constantly going through him losing ultimately. But when you have such a way about it, as in this episode, it's truly a satisfying moment. Many happy returns. There aren't many happy returns here, but I couldn't help but have a smile on my face at the end there. I think this might be, like we said before, this might be my favorite one of the series thus far, and it might be, period. I don't know. We still have, what, like 10 episodes left to see?
Roughly, yeah. And the thing, too, is you bring up something that I think is worth discussing. And obviously now in today's watered down, high volume content of media that's out there, not just movies, but TV shows here in the 2020s, we know that there's things that have developed that just become commonplace. We've talked about how on Tuesday nights when RDV and I go over action movies or other 80s type films, Jackie Chan, he used to, and the outtakes would show clips of him screwing stuff up or messing up a stunt or whatever. And then, of course, other movies started to use that. And it's become a thing where you wait till the end credits because there's going to be a surprise scene at the end. And now with instantaneous communication with the internet and whatnot, everybody always looks for these Easter eggs, as they like to call them, and cutesy little things, so much so that people like to put them in. And it's not just product placement, if you will, like, oh, we're going to put a Coke in every scene that has with this person or whatever because we're under a contract with us. None of that. With The Prisoner, I haven't been hardcore paying attention to the opening bit. And sometimes I'll be honest, when it starts, while I like the initial lightning and I'm driving, my favorite scene is him running, on the beach at night, shaking his fist at the sky, saying, I'm not a number, I'm a free man. And I have noticed that there's been a little bit of difference, a line here or two in some of them, but not so much where I'm going back and looking at them all. But it does seem like the whole answer to the show is summed up in this, 1 or 2 minute little intro with what goes on. And each of these episodes really is like a big explanation of it. So I think you brought up a really valid point there of how number 2 really wasn't shown. And if you did not have a clever, watchful eye, or somebody didn't suggest it, or you didn't go back and watch it. And again, in the 60s, I'm not quite sure if there was VCRs yet. I mean, so I'm going to roughly say no. So unless you were over there watching at the time or a year or two later when they got run in the United States, everybody may have missed this, but it was deliberately put in there because you're absolutely right. The new number 2, at least at the end of this episode, who knows the next episode, is this Mrs. Butterworth character. And I just think that's the genius of The Prisoner, is that you don't try to trick anybody. You don't try to fool anybody. You basically show them up front what the episode is, what that's about, and you just show how your person that we're supposed to be rooting for here, we're in his shoes. We see how he does things. We get to learn by watching him do stuff. It's very dumbed down to me when you have those scenes today in media where people are like, I call it the walking scene, where all of a sudden they come around the corner and they start talking and walking, and it's a big data dump of expository nonsense just to get the watcher listening to it, right? Or like we've talked about in action films, instead of nice long takes, you got all these quick jumbled cuts where, a 5'2", 100-pound Asian woman can kick everybody's ass. And I can't stand it. I think that's treating your audience as dumb. Now, look, it's totally unbelievable what's happened here in The Prisoner as far as him and what happened here logistically, right? But at the time, with what we've gone through with this whole show, it still didn't screw us or get weak enough where we suspended our disbelief more than what we normally did. It's like, yeah, okay, I know it's a movie with fantasy elements in it, but now you've gone too far. Now I can't believe it. CGI is so bad, I can't even believe that. But yeah, the whole intro thing, I think you said actually is really a gem of a comment, because it summarized this whole episode. And if you have a keen eye and you go back and you watch it, you go, oh, I should have seen what was coming, because they told us in front. That's the beauty of when a movie does it. Very few people do it or get it right, or when they do it, people get pissed, a la Sixth Sense, or more recently, Malignant. Great comment there too. I don't know if that opens up any more thoughts for you, but to me, I think that was a tremendous insight.
No, I'm pretty much done with it, which was kind of disappointing because at that point, this episode was just, it was stunning.
Yeah. Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Season 1, episode 7. Many happy returns. Next week we'll be doing episode 8. In a little while we'll be going live here 7 p.m. Eastern time to cover the 1984 monster rom-com called Romancing the Stone that many people think the recent release of, what is it, The Lost City is a bad remake of, but we'll maybe be discussing that here shortly. So tune in for that. If you got any requests, let us know. We'll be happy to take a look at those here on the Xtreme Movie Show. For Professor Pixel, myself, Rob, your host, and RDV, and everybody involved here at the Xtreme Movie Show, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. As always, stay extreme and be seeing you.
Be seeing you.